Welcome back to Nothing But the Truth. I'm Trudy Stern. We are just days removed from a dramatic, dangerous escalation, a direct war between Israel and Iraq that sent shockwaves throughout the region and around the world. At a time like this, clarity is hard to find. And that's exactly why I'm so glad to have Jonathan Schanzer back with us. Jonathan is Senior Vice President for Research at Foundation for Defense of Democracies, a former U.S. terrorism finance analyst, and one of the most trusted voices on the Middle East. He happened to be in Israel when war broke out and had to take a very circuitous route home, giving him not just expert insight, but firsthand perspective. So glad to always have him with us, especially at a moment like this. Jonathan, welcome back to Nothing But the Truth.
Thanks, Trudy. Great to be with you.
So first of all, you were in Israel when war broke out. Tell us about that and how you got out of there.
Well, I had actually showed up 2 days before. I took a couple of meetings, and we had a delegation of 18 young journalists who we took to Israel, some of whom for the first time. We had our opening dinner in Jerusalem, and at around 3 in the morning, the sirens started going off. My initial thought was the Houthis were at it again. You know, a one-off ballistic missile out of Yemen. It would be shot down most likely by Israeli air defense, and then I'd go back to bed. But as I sat there in the stairwell of my hotel, I quickly realized that something more profound had taken place. We began to learn that Israel was striking Iran's nuclear facilities for fear of an Iranian nuclear breakout. What followed was several days of maintaining our delegation within the four walls of a conference room in our hotel because we needed to stay close to a shelter. Um, we did our best to keep the programming going and to teach these journalists what they needed to know about Israel. And so we brought in journalists and military people and civil society experts. But I will say that the most important lesson that any of them could have picked up were the 10 times that we had to go running to a shelter in the middle of the night. Most of us didn't sleep for more than 2 or 3 hours a night for the entire time we were there. It was grueling, it was exhausting, it was stressful, and it was a deeply Israeli experience. Um, at a certain point, I began to realize that there wasn't much more that we were going to be able to get out of keeping our group there. So I undertook the decision to arrange for an extraction overland via Jordan. The airspace in Israel had been shut down, so we had really no choice but to go in that direction. And so we were finally able to cross. We went to Amman for an evening and then headed off to Greece before heading home. I think that it's safe to say that our delegation was deeply emotional throughout all of this. Many of them really wanted to go to learn, but they did not sign up for being in an active war zone with ballistic missiles that had a ton of explosives affixed to the warheads. This is not what they signed up for. So I think ultimately we did the right thing. I personally felt very ambivalent about leaving Israel because to leave Israel in a time of crisis like that is somewhat gut-wrenching for me. But my responsibility was with this delegation, and I'm just thrilled that they're home.
I think it couldn't have been a more unbelievably impactful experience for this delegation, and what you have done in having them have this experience, although you didn't know that it was going to be that, probably did more for their careers going forward in terms of how they'll view Israel and their thoughts about what Israelis have to go through.
Yeah, I mean, undeniably, it was, I mean, baptism by fire, literally. But also, I think many of them, experienced what it was like to be a wartime correspondent, and it was probably their first opportunity to serve in that respect. So they were filing pieces from bomb shelters and from the hotel as we were struggling with the day to day of this new and complicated war landscape. So, my hope is that they look back on this as a memory of a lifetime, and I'm certain that they will.
So, what publications are they part of? Should
Um,
we look for these? Should we look for these
I'm gonna, I'm gonna,
articles?
I'm gonna leave them out of this for now. You'll see them if you go look for them. I don't want to call out anybody by name, but there are a lot of prominent publications as well as TV stations, and so they're out there in lots of different ways. And I think they'll identify me or FDD if they choose to. If not, they'll be writing about them as themselves, which is obviously their right to do so, and kind of the way that we had structured the trip. Um, but
Couldn't could
I do,
not have been scripted better. This is really fantastic,
yeah,
actually, really an amazing thing. So,
yeah.
so let's get to the right to the meat of the whole topic. This war that's now escalated, that's going on between Israel and Iran. Tell us about the initial Mossad setup. And what we've all heard is that it's been ongoing for maybe 20 years in terms of how they've set up the stage for the actual attack.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it needs to be understood that the Mossad has been there for a while. Everyone can recall the 2018 extraction of the nuclear archive by Mossad agents. And of course, there are ongoing cyber activities in Iran showing that the Israelis are in the system. Um, but I think certainly for the last 8 months or so, we've heard about this forward drone base where they were printing 3D parts for these drones that attacked, the apartments of nuclear scientists and top leaders of the regime. This was a truly remarkable integration of multiple agencies within the Israeli security apparatus. From military intelligence, or Aman as it's known, the Mossad, the IDF, the Air Force, they have all worked together in seamless ways to pull off a truly remarkable operation. The Israelis have struck military sites, nuclear scientists, top leaders of the regime. They've struck the military sites related to the regime. They have hit Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps positions. They have struck gas and oil fields and refineries. They have struck manufacturing centers relating to the military industrial complex. The scope of this onslaught, and by the way, having Israeli aircraft take off from Israel, travel 1,000 miles across the region, drop, 6 or 8 munitions, fly back, refuel, put in a new pilot, put on new munitions under the wings of these F-35s, and fly out again. This has been now ongoing for a full week as we're speaking right now, Trudy, a full week of operations where they have been around the clock hammering the regime. There are no more air defenses in the country. They have taken out something like half of the missile launchers. Of course, missiles are still getting through, and Israel still has some work to do in terms of hunting down the additional missile stores and destroying them. But the nuclear program has been set back by years. The military capabilities have been set back by probably more than a decade. Um, Again, there are still dangers that lurk for Israel, and we saw that with the bombing of an Israeli hospital in the southern part of the country. Soroka Medical Center was hit, and that was, I think, a jarring moment for the Israeli public. But as I understand it, the targeting of regime assets is ahead of schedule, according to war planners. The number of casualties is lower than had been expected. The number of injuries lower than expected. The amount of damage incurred lower than expected. So I think by all accounts, this has been a successful campaign thus far. What I think we really are waiting to find out is I think there are three paths that we can maybe go down here when you think about how this conflict would end. One is a diplomatic solution brokered by Donald Trump or by someone else where the regime agrees to relinquish its nuclear program and to surrender amidst the Israeli onslaught. I don't know how likely that is, but I think that would be preferable because it would mean less bloodshed, less destruction. There is another scenario in which either the Israelis or even the United States applies enough military pressure that it breaks the back of the regime in Tehran. If the U.S. gets involved, that likely means one 30,000-pound bomb, a massive ordnance penetrator on the Fordo nuclear site, and maybe another bunker buster that hits the bunker of Ali Khamenei, the senior or the supreme leader, rather, of Iran. The last option, which scares me a little bit, is a war of attrition that could go on for weeks, where the Israelis continue to sustain incoming missile fire, and at the same time, the Iranian regime continues to suffer one blow after the next, but neither side gives up. And what this does is it leads to the destruction of additional infrastructure in Israel. It leads to, more lives lost in Israel, more lives lost in Iran. That is I think the one scenario that I'd like to try to avoid here. But wars have a way of taking on their own trajectory here, and we're going to wait and see what trajectory this war takes.
So it seems like in looking at your three different options, option number one, which would be actually having, Khamenei now say, okay, I'm coming to the table and I will, relinquish all nuclear capabilities and making some sort of deal. But it doesn't seem like President Trump is receptive to that anymore. Like he keeps saying, although he's very unpredictable, he keeps saying no, that too late, too late, too late. And can we really trust him? I think we've seen that we really can't trust him at all. And what are his capabilities at this point? Does he have much left? Like he seems like in a very bad position to be bargaining. And option number two would be taking out the Fordo nuclear site. So that seems like the best option of all three. Can Israel do that without America?
I mean, I think, look, first of all, as it relates to the president, yes, he's unpredictable, but I think as of midday on Thursday, the spokesperson for the White House did indicate that the president would like to engage with Iran in a sort of a last-ditch effort to get a deal that would end the nuclear program peacefully and lead to a capitulation by the regime. I think it sounds fine to me to try that as long as it happens soon. Allowing for this attrition war to continue strikes me as almost counterproductive and would potentially cede more momentum to the Iranians, even as they lose power and strength, because Israel is tiny. And you can see that every strike does have an impact. Although I will just note here that the resilience that I saw of the Israeli people while I was on the ground there this past week was absolutely inspiring. The defiance of the people, the patience that they have to allow this. Nobody likes getting bombed. Nobody likes not being able to sleep. But 90% of Israelis support this operation because they know that it could lead to a better future for them and their children, even if the immediate future is one of bombs and destruction and bloodshed. Um, as for the Fordo site in particular, look, my understanding is that the Israelis don't have all of the tools that they need. There are ways that the Israelis could do this. A commando raid where they put boots on the ground and have people breach the facility and then to destroy it after having done so. That's a possibility. But yes, I think that a 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrator or two or three would ultimately lay waste to this to this facility, and that is, I think, that would mean really at the end of the day game over for the nuclear program. There is
But Israel cannot do that without the assistance of the United States.
well, again, if they
Correct?
wanted to go in with boots on the ground, they might be able to do that. It may be a suicide mission, but they could do it. And I'm sure that there are those who would sign up for exactly that mission in Israel. There may be other tools, by the way, that the Israelis have either developed or acquired from the United States that would allow for, an aerial bombing, maybe followed up by a commando raid. There are tools that are still available, but I do think that if the goal is to end the Fordo facility, the easiest way of doing that. But you have to remember, Trudy, there is a debate that's happening inside the United States right now where isolationists have emerged from within the Trump camp, and they are calling for not just caution, they're calling for all-out restraint. They're saying that the United States should not battle or should not be fighting Israel's battles. I have to say, I understand it completely, and I am not advocating for the United States to fight on Israel's behalf. Although I must say that the United States has suffered a great deal at the hands of the Iranians in Iraq, Afghanistan, Lebanon. I mean, the Iranians have been behind a great number of acts of violence against U.S. servicemen and against the United States over the years. We have an axe to grind here as well. But ultimately, whether the U.S. decides to go in and to tip the balance in this war, that is the debate that's going on right now. And it is high drama here in Washington. This debate is, I mean, it's brought in people like Tucker Carlson and J.D. Vance and, I mean, a number of others that are arguing against such a move. I do feel like, at least right now, Donald Trump seems very committed to ending this on the right terms, not just for Israel, but for the United States. And so, again, high drama. We're watching it all play out in real time.
I think yes, it is quite remarkable every time you turn on the news and see this playing out. It seems like President Trump is not going the way of the isolationist, like a Tucker Carlson. It seems like he actually chastised him the other day and said, "You're telling me America first? I created the word America first. Don't tell me." And I think Iran is a very big threat to America. I think anybody who doesn't realize that is, putting their head in the sand or acting foolish, because death to America is chanted much louder and first above death to Israel. So, I mean, they view us as the big Satan, Israel as the little Satan. We go hand in hand. So anyone who would advocate for staying out of this would be advocating for putting America at peril.
Yeah, and I think also I think that's all correct. And I think, understanding the history of Iran's involvement in attacks against the United States, it goes back to the 1980s. Actually, I mean, it goes back to 1979 when the hostage crisis began, and this regime, held American hostages for almost a full year before they were finally released when Ronald Reagan was elected president. Um, but I think the other thing that is fundamentally misunderstood by the isolationists is the extent to which Russia and China, the two other primary adversaries of the United States, how they see Iran as as part of their axis. They actually, they are the revisionists. They are the ones that are trying to undermine the American-led world order. They are the ones that are trying to erode American strength around the world. And Iran is absolutely part of that. They're providing Russia with missiles and drones. They're providing the Chinese with oil, right? I mean, they have an alliance, and that alliance can be undermined, in my view, with the defeat of Iran. Again, I want to stress here that I'm not advocating for the U.S. to intervene, but what I am noting is that the United States is benefiting hugely from Israel's operations. Israel is steadily beating, grinding down the capabilities of a regime that has destabilized the Middle East and American interests for decades. And they are doing it because it is in their interest, first and foremost. But that doesn't mean that we can't acknowledge the importance of what they're achieving for America abroad.
Not just America, I think for the entire world. Um, the Iranian population, at this point, it seems to me that that is a big piece of this equation. Also, I'm not sure. Maybe you could tell us whether or not the Iranian population that is opposed to Khamenei and the IRGC and that regime, would they sit back and just allow Khamenei to reemerge? I think he's been very much degraded in terms that regime has been degraded in terms of its power and ability to control the rest of the population.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's hard to know where the people are We know that in some cases they've been cheering Israeli strikes. And I do think that the Israelis are, I think at this point now, dedicated to eroding key pillars of the regime. And so you've probably seen the internet has been taken out on, I think at least on more than one occasion. The stock market in Iran, was closed. The exports of oil and gas have been, really just hindered, or in some cases all out blocked because of Israeli strikes. They've taken out senior leaders of the regime. They've taken out, I think, at least in one case, a police station or security forces associated with the regime that are involved in repression of the people. So I think the jury's still out in terms of whether the people of Iran choose to rise up. But when you look at this moment, it is a huge opportunity to empower the people of Iran. I don't want to oversimplify things. I think that there are challenges that will await the nation of Iran should the regime fall. There are minorities, ethnic and sectarian minorities that, may not fall in line with the majority Persian population that may have a fundamentally different view of what Iran should be under new management. But I do think that at this point, anything would be better than what we have, which is a terror sponsoring regime that has threatened the entire region, threatens the United States, threatens Europe, threatens Israel. If that regime goes down, the opportunity to fundamentally chart a new course for the Middle East, to bend the arc of history in the right way. I can't understate how, or I can't overstate rather, how important this moment is. This is a crucial moment in history. I've been telling my children, I've been telling students, lectures, we are watching history unfold right now. The events that are playing out right now in the Middle East could have reverberations for decades, maybe even centuries to come. This opportunity can put the Middle East on a better trajectory than anything that we have seen, at least in my lifetime. There have been flashes, glimpses of optimism from Donald Trump's normalization agreements, the Abraham Accords, before that, the Oslo Accords, moments where, we saw flashes of promise, but the shadow of the Iranian regime has been felt at every turn over the last 4+ decades. If you could remove that shadow, imagine what this region is capable of.
Do you see a reemergence of Pahlavi? I see him all over the internet, you know, saying that he will return and bring democracy back to Iran, and that we could see a new day. Do you see that happening?
Look, I don't know whether he will try to assert himself as an alternative to the regime. There are some who believe that he should. I don't know if he's been in touch with the people in such a way that he has a feel for what's happening on the ground. I know his people do, and there are organizations that support him that here in the United States that have a big following in Iran. But whether Reza Shah Pahlavi is ultimately suited for this job, whether it's a good thing, I don't know how to assess it. What we've learned the hard way, Trudy, is that when we try to engineer regime change, when we try to engineer new people to come in, that has rarely worked out for the best. And that's one of the reasons why the isolationists have been wagging their finger at everyone and warning. They're saying, don't try to engineer this. We don't do regime change. We're not good at it. Look, I think that we have overlearned some of the lessons of our past failures in Iraq and Afghanistan. But I also think that when we consider the impact that this regime has had on the Middle East, the negative impact that it's had, I still see opportunity. I don't want to say that we should put blood and treasure on the line here. That I don't think American soldiers should die for this cause, and I don't believe we should spend trillions of dollars trying to fix Iran. I think that we can try to shape the outcome of this conflict from the outside, and I think that would be a very positive thing for us to do judiciously, right? figuring out how to just nudge things in the right direction. And I think that begins with helping the Israelis without us pulling the trigger, giving them the tools that they need in order to secure a victory, giving assistance to those on the ground who think that they may have an opportunity to further erode the power of the regime. These are things that we can do at minimal cost and minimal risk. And then we can reassess every day whether if things are moving in the right direction, whether if we just put our finger on the scale just a little bit with one or two strikes, maybe we could end the war. That would be a positive too. So there are a lot of there are a lot of different off ramps here for the United States. But for now, I'm very pleased to see that the Trump administration is taking all of this seriously, that they feel that this is something that is in their interest to continue to pursue.
So at this exact second, what is Iran's capabilities? What has been taken out and what is left?
So just about every nuclear facility has been hit, maybe not all destroyed. The one real remaining one is the Fordo facility, which is burrowed deep inside of a mountain. And there's also enriched uranium in the compound at Isfahan. And what they don't want to do, they don't want to bomb the enriched uranium because it could create radioactive fallout. So, in other words, they need a team to extract the enriched uranium and they need to be able to remove whatever they can or to destroy the capabilities at Fordo. Um, Beyond that, 14 nuclear scientists have been killed, so the knowledge base of the regime has been reduced significantly. The heads of Iran's nuclear program also, they're not nuclear scientists, but they're the government figures. A number of them have been killed. IRGC leaders have been killed. This is the force, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. This is the force that is the most loyal to the regime and is the best trained and most competent fighters in the regime. They are reeling and they've taken a number of direct hits. The conventional armed forces of Iran, I mean, the chief of staff of Iran's military was killed, and then his replacement was also killed. So they're now on to the third one at this point. Oil facilities, gas facilities, factories producing drones, factories producing missiles, all destroyed. What we're concerned about right now when we talk about the military capabilities are these long range ballistic missiles. Ballistic missiles are roughly the size of a bus. They carry, 500 pounds or 1,000 kilos of explosives. They're accurate. These missiles, as we've seen, they've hit a number of their intended targets. There's some that they don't hit as well. But this is, I think, the main concern. The launchers, as the Israelis have been hitting them, that has been an important component of this because if you don't have any launchers, you can't launch. Even if you have 1,000 missiles or 2,000 missiles, if you don't have the launchers, you can't fire them off. And so the Israelis are hunting a lot of these launchers while continuing to strike, hour after hour inside Iran, eroding these capabilities. And so when you look at what they've done, it has been remarkable work. 6, 7 days of fighting has left the regime in utter disrepair, but they are still fighting on, and therefore Israel must fight on as well. And again, I fear the outcome that I really don't want to see is that this goes on for months and months, and Israel, sustains significant damage across the country in their effort to painstakingly snuff out the regime and all of its capabilities. I think that's the game plan if they have to do it. But I do think, again, that, political pressure from the United States and from perhaps others around the world, that could be a very beneficial thing here. That if the regime feels like it's truly in danger of a wider war with other players, maybe it stands down. Maybe Donald Trump pulls the trigger himself, or maybe there's other capabilities that the Israelis are either given or that they bring out that we haven't seen yet. But in the meantime, they are dominating Iranian airspace, cyberspace, and in many ways, I think even the psychological impact of the regime feeling like it's collapsed, the walls are closing in on them. This is, all good things, truly.
Do you think it was a good idea that Khomeini was not taken out? I know that that was,
Yeah,
I
not yet. Not yet. I mean, but I do think that, especially today after the Israeli hospital Soroka in southern Israel, after it was hit, I am getting the sense that the Israelis are losing patience, and that, they may have determined that it's time. I think the question is, where is this bunker where Ali Khamenei is hiding? And, are there civilian casualties that would be associated with this attack? We spoke about the Iranian people. The Iranian people are key to this. The Israelis don't want to alienate them. And so bombing Iran and killing, let's say, 1,000 civilians in order to take out the supreme leader could come at a cost. You don't want the Iranian people rallying around the flag against Israel for having taken out the regime. You want them celebrating Israel. What you really want, if it's at all possible, is for them to be waving American and Israeli flags when the supreme leader goes down.
so final question to you. How do you see this playing out? What's your prediction? What do you see?
Well, again, those three scenarios that I painted for you are the big ones, and I'll try to, at least game out what the percentages are. I think the percentages of an Iranian, or the likelihood of an Iranian capitulation, where this regime says we give up, it's hard for me to imagine that happening, because if they surrender to the United States and they surrender to Israel, they have surrendered their very ideology. In other words, their ideology is bent. It's all about the destruction of Israel and death to America. These are the things that they chant all the time. You cannot be the Islamic Republic of Iran after you have capitulated to Israel and the United States. And so the idea of surrender to me seems unlikely. Maybe they will try. It's also possible that you could have some kind of internal coup where a pragmatist inside the regime says, we don't want to die for you, Ali Khamenei, and so we're going to topple you and we're going to make deals with the West, and it becomes a different Islamic Republic, maybe one that's a little bit more docile, a little bit more pragmatic, and that's certainly that's certainly possible. There is the next possibility, which is that the U.S. gets involved. I think I'd still probably put it at a low percentage, maybe 30%, maybe 40. It's not the overwhelming likelihood. Then I think comes an Israeli victory where they just simply pound the regime into submission, given that they are dominating the skies, even as they sustain damage at home. And I do think that right now the regime is just reeling. There is no way out when they can't defend their own skies. The Israeli Air Force has been just utterly lethal and precise as it continues to generate more intelligence targets, or more intelligence for more targets, and more is destroyed. There, I'd put that one at a fairly high percentage, because I think that's just already what's in the works. And you could see a capitulation of the regime and then going in and cleaning up at Fordo and Isfahan. In other words, rather than doing it now, it happens after the regime falls. And I think that's certainly feasible. And then the last one is the war of attrition. And I think there's still maybe a 30% chance of that. And I think that's the regime's strategy. I think the regime would like to see this go on for the opportunity to grind Israel down, as they have patience and they're willing to fight Israel to the last Iranian. And Israel needs to disabuse them of this. Israel needs to make it clear that this will come at a horrible cost for them. And look, at the end of the day, war is about imposing your will on your enemy. And both sides are trying to do that right now. Whether the United States imposes its will remains to be seen.
Well, it seems like we are seeing a true David and Goliath playing out right in front of our eyes. And I I do think that the outcome will, as I share your thoughts, that it will be tremendously historic, and it will change the shape of not just the Middle East, but the world and what is to come. I hope it will be a good outcome. I'm very optimistic, hopefully. And once again, I thank you so much, Jonathan, for coming on and your analysis and your clarity and perspective during such a volatile and uncertain moment. Your voice is so invaluable, and we're grateful to have you back on the show and help us through these unbelievably complicated situations. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, Trudy, anytime.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us. This has been Nothing But the Truth. You can catch us every Thursday at 9:30 p.m. on the radio. And if you missed any part of this show or want to listen to past episodes, you can find Nothing But the Truth wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, stay strong, stay informed, and keep seeking nothing but the truth.